Welcome to the Retro Video Store Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Retro Video Store Podcast. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm your co-host, Dave.
And that's David. David is our co-host again this week. And Neil is out for another week. He's taking care of some business, and hopefully he'll be back next week. But here we are with another episode. If I sound scratchy to you, it's because I was singing really loud, obnoxiously, and now I kind of blew my voice out. So,
What were you singing?
I think I was singing 80s hair metal really loud, like Home Sweet Home. I was singing that really loud and trying to annoy Jamie and Andrew. And yet I damaged my voice, so here we are.
Were you playing the guitar?
No, I was just on YouTube. So we are going to make the best of this. This week we are talking about Trading Places from 1983, which is a classic comedy. We don't do comedies that much on the podcast just because it's easy just to fall into that. Remember that part? That was funny, huh? Remember that part? That was funny.
Yeah.
But we're going to try to talk about this movie because it is fun. It is funny, and it's got a lot of you got to think back to 1983, the way things were, and how things are now, and the way people view movies now through the lens of today versus, what it was like in 83. So we'll talk about a little bit about that. But let's do what we always do. David, what'd you watch this week?
I didn't watch much. I watched a lot of sports, caught up on a lot of football, and I actually did not watch any actually like TV shows or movies or anything. Just a ton of trying to soak up as much college football before it's over.
I know the season's going by super fast.
Yeah.
Who are you rooting for this year?
In college?
Yep.
I'm a Notre Dame fan, but I also am a realist, so they'll be out in the first round. And but I think I really do. I like Oregon's coach for staying in Oregon, and Dan Lanning for staying in Oregon and turning down all that money where he could have gone to Alabama or I'm sure some other SEC school that would have opened the bag for him. And look what he's done at Oregon. So I think I'm kind of pulling for them. It's the final team.
Yeah, same here. I've been an Oregon fan for a long, long time. Once Chip Kelly came in and they started becoming better, and they had an innovative offense and cool uniforms and just the whole. I've been following them for over a decade now, and kind of would be nice for them to win a national championship. Somebody not from an SEC school or an ACC school. It would be nice to see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a lifelong Notre Dame fan, so because I was raised Catholic and that's the law to be a Notre Dame fan. So
yeah,
people our regular listeners are like, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? Sports? Talk about movies? The hell?
Yeah. Eric, what did you watch?
I watched, I got a new TV. I got a brand new Sony 65-inch Bravia 8. So I put it down in the basement and was just kind of watching some stuff. I watched Godzilla vs. Destroya on it, which was amazing. And just kind of watching, I'll put in a DVD just to highlight to see how it looks, and the sound and stuff. So I watched a little bit of Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, just to test it out and stuff. So that's really all I watched. And then I watched Trading Places and a shitload of football. I mean, a lot of football. It's kind of sad how much football I watch, especially on a Saturday. Oh my God.
Yeah.
The first game starts at 10 in the morning. Then I'll watch that game. Then I'll watch the 1:30 game. Then I'll watch the 5:30 game. And then I'll try to catch a little bit of the 8 o'clock game. Then I go to bed. So it's like it's just a sickening amount of football.
Yeah. Just constantly changing the channels between what Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS, just constantly and maybe ESPN, just there's always a game somewhere that's this time of year that's exciting to watch and has a meaning. a meaningful game. So I found myself doing the same thing.
Neil would be snoring at us both right now if we are talking about football
You're welcome.
or sports ball, as he calls it. He's not a big sports fan, so yeah. So, Trading Places is a classic comedy, and I've seen it tons and tons of times over the years. It's one of those staple. You rent it. It's on HBO. It's on Showtime. You watch it over and over and over again. And, it's just about the star power. It's the Eddie Murphy, Dan Aykroyd, Jamie Lee Curtis kind of star power. It's a really, really fun movie. And it's just one of those, it was a cable classic back in the day. It was on all the time. And I remember recording it on VHS and watching it. And it's just, I think it's one of the best comedies of the 80s. It's super funny. And, there's things that haven't aged well, but I hate to look through at these movies with the lens of 2024. I'd rather enjoy them for the time they came out in. Dan Aykroyd in blackface hasn't really. That's problematic in today's world, but
yeah.
But I think it's funny, and I really love that early '80s kind of feel. There was kind of a grittiness, especially in the movie, and when they show Philadelphia at the beginning of the movie, it looks kind of run down, a little gritty, the poor parts of town, and just the atmosphere. The rich people live in this completely other echelon versus the poor people. I thought John Landis did a good job of kind of putting that out there. Trading Places, Internet Movie Database says a snobbish investor and a wily street con artist find their positions reversed as part of a bet by two callous millionaires. Yeah, that's true. That's what the plot is, but like I said, who writes these? I want to get the job of writing Internet Movie Database taglines on the side. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, I thought years ago you and Neil were going to start rewrite or sending your rewrites.
Yeah, we should. I know. We got sidetracked for somehow.
Yeah.
This movie was directed by John Landis, written by Timothy Harris and Herschel Weingrod. Budget of $15 million, but made $120 million worldwide. And this movie really cemented Eddie Murphy as a box office draw because he was really hitting it on SNL. People, even the rest of the cast wasn't great, but Eddie Murphy was the breakout star of SNL. And then he was in 48 Hours with Nick Nolte, which is it's a movie I have not seen in a long, long time, but I remember watching it over and over again when it came out. Is when, like I said, another one of those HBO staples.
Oh, 48 Hours was, yeah. It was great.
Gritty crime drama with Eddie Murphy to make it better. So 1983 was an interesting year at the box office. Trading Places was number 4. And that's pretty impressive for, for a comedy. Number 1 was Return of the Jedi, made a ton of money. Terms of Endearment, which is a drama, made $108 million, which is odd. I have not seen Terms of Endearment in a long, long time. I remember crying. It's one of those sad lady has cancer type movies with Jack Nicholson and Shirley MacLaine and Deborah Winger. Flashdance which I've only ever seen once and just didn't really like. I was like, meh. Came out, that was number 3. Trading Places was number 4. Superman 3 was number 5, which is awful.
Yeah.
awful movie.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
War Games, Octopussy, which is a James Bond movie with a terrible name. How did they come up with that name? And they're like, Octopussy, it sounds great. We'll do that. Yeah. That was a Roger Moore James Bond movie. I only remember him dressed like a clown in that movie, and that's the only thing I remember about that. I don't remember anything else about Octopussy.
I don't know if I ever saw it.
Sudden Impact with Clint Eastwood. Staying Alive, which is the Saturday Night Fever sequel with John Travolta. Mr. Mom, Risky Business, Vacation. So there are a lot of classic movies from the 80s were in 83. Jaws 3D, Scarface. Porky's the Next Day, Twilight Zone the movie, which we'll talk about and how it relates to this movie, The Outsiders, The Right Stuff, Cujo and Christine, The Dead Zone, lots of Stephen King adaptations in '83.
No real, all in one year, huh?
A Christmas Story, Valley Girl. Man, all the right movies and Risky Business in the same year for Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Private School, which was definitely an HBO staple with boobs. Revenge of the Ninja, one of our greatest episodes. We've done Revenge of the Ninja. Lone Wolf McQuade, which we've also done an episode on. Got to check that out. Yeah, interesting year for 1983. Amityville 3D, The Hunger.
Wow. In '83, they did Amityville. Yeah. Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was then when the 3D craze was going on, because there was Jaws 3D, Amityville 3D. There was Friday the 13th in 3D. Tons of 3D movies are coming out at that time. You're the Hunter from the Future. Videodrome. Very nice. Rocky 3 re-release. So yeah, definitely a interesting year. I was 10 years old in 1983, so it was a banner year for me. How old were you, David?
I was 5.
Oh, wow. Yikes.
You know, it's interesting is John Landis is a name I've heard, and while you're just going off on that list there, we took a minute to look at some of his other bigger known movies, if you don't mind for a second. But
yeah, go for it.
You know, he followed this up a couple years later with Spies Like Us,
mm-hmm.
Three Amigos,
yep,
Coming to America.
Mm-hmm.
There was another one that caught my attention. He did Beverly Hills Cop, right? And then Blues Brothers 2000, which is a shit.
Mm-hmm.
But he did what's really interesting. I wonder how he feels about it now. Is he did a lot of Michael Jackson music videos.
Yeah, '83 was a big year for him because he did Thriller, and that was really put on the map. Well, let's get back to the movie he did before this. He did Twilight Zone the movie, and Twilight Zone the movie was like a anthology movie because it had the director of Mad Max did one episode, Steven Spielberg did one, George Miller, and then John Landis did an episode. A piece of the movie, a segment of the movie. But in John Landis's movie, Vic Morrow was the protagonist in his segment, but he got killed during the making of the movie because John Landis was demanding like this helicopter fly lower and the explosions to go off closer. It caused the helicopter to fall and on Vic Morrow, decapitating him and one of the kids he was carrying into the segment. So it was like a cursed movie. There's actually on Shudder, the streaming service, there's an episode of Cursed Movies about it. And it does not make John Landis look good at all when it comes to his culpability in the Twilight Zone movie debacle and how these people died. And the two kids were they were filming at night and they were being paid under the table. So they weren't really like professional actors.
Oh, wow.
So it was a big old mess and he was acquitted of it. But this trial lasted for a long, long time. And John Landis, the personality, I really like. I don't know if the real person is as nice as and likable as the director, because he does a lot of commentary on a lot of the horror movie documentaries I like. And if you watch him, in American Werewolf in London and stuff like that, he's a great storyteller. He does a lot of fun stuff, but apparently an asshole when it comes to what he did in that in that whole situation with the Twilight Zone. Didn't make him come off very well in that documentary on Cursed Films. But this movie was made directly afterwards, and this was like his rebound movie. It came out after Trading Places, but it was shot before. and it was like his reputation was really sullied by the whole situation, and this movie kind of helped keep him as a viable director.
Huh. I did not know that.
Yeah, and that footage is awful. If you watch the actual footage of the helicopter crash, it's just terrible. Back in the day when I wanted to see when I was an edgelord type person, I want to see some sick stuff, and you would go to rotten.com or all those things and watch really gross stuff. No, I don't have that type of. I don't have that stomach that I can't stomach that kind of stuff anymore. Back when I was, younger and dumber, I would watch all that kind of stuff. But seeing that, it was really rough. And it was an awful thing, but I don't want to bring everybody down, but the Twilight Zone tragedy hangs over John Landis because of what happened. But this movie was kind of a risk for everybody because 48 Hours hadn't come out yet, and they knew that Eddie Murphy was super popular on TV, but they didn't know if he was a bankable star. And this movie was written for Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder, who were still a popular comedy duo with Bustin' Loose and what's the other one they did together? Silver Streak. They were kind of like a comedy duo. Was this the first time you saw this movie?
This is the first time I've seen this movie.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I mentioned to somebody this week that I was watching it, they went with, I think they got it confused with like a version of like The Parent Trap or something, a different movie that came out in the 80s. I can't remember which one they came up with. And then it kind of got me a little confused. So then I forgot it was Dan Aykroyd. I thought it was John Candy. I just got really confused about it. But yeah, I've never seen this.
There was a body swap comedy with Dudley Moore and Kirk Cameron where they switched places, and there was Freaky Friday. And Jamie, that's funny that you mentioned that because Jamie was watching it downstairs with me. And she's like, "Oh, I thought they swapped brains or something." I'm like, "Oh, no, you have totally not understand this movie."
Yeah, because it's got to be a different movie. Yeah, so I was confused, and so yeah, this was a whole new experience for me. It was fun.
So cast as Dan Aykroyd as Lewis Winthorpe III. He does a really good job of playing a snobby kind of jerk at the beginning of the movie. Eddie Murphy is Billy Ray Valentine. Ralph Bellamy is Randolph Duke. Don Amici is Mortimer Duke. Interesting thing about Don Amici is they thought he was dead. They couldn't get a hold of him. And all his residuals were going to his son, like the checks for the movies and stuff he had done were going to his son. And he was just living a quiet, retirement, not doing movies anymore. And then they pulled him out to do this movie, which he agreed to. And then 2 years later, he gets an Academy Award for Cocoon.
Yeah, so okay, that's where he's from. Cocoon. The whole time I watched this, like, where is this guy out of? But he's Cocoon. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was always on TV.
Yeah, which is crazy. This movie is responsible for him pulling him out of kind of like a retirement and making him more popular than ever. Probably more popular later in life than he was when he was acting in the 40s and 50s. Jamie Lee Curtis, of course. This was also a risk. Going back to Dan Aykroyd, this was a risk for him too, or the studio didn't want to hire him because they just thought he was a second fiddle. They thought that he was just John Belushi's straight acting, the straight man to John Belushi in the Blues Brothers and on SNL and stuff. So they didn't think that he had any marketability on his own. And he was in a movie called Dr. Detroit, which proved that he was awful in that movie. Actually, I kind of liked that movie. It was one of those movies I thought was fun as a kid. And it's stupid, but it kind of bombed. But then he was in this movie that kind of like put him on a better track, and he was in Ghostbusters and, Three Amigos. No, he wasn't in Three Amigos. That's Martin Short and Chevy Chase and Steve Martin. But he was in My Girl and a couple of other things that made him more of a well-known actor. Jamie Lee Curtis, though, she was a scream queen. They didn't want to hire her because she had only been in horror movies up to that point, and they didn't really think that she would be doing a good job. The interesting thing is that she helped make a documentary with John Landis called Coming Soon. and he liked her a lot and put her in this movie. And she didn't get paid very much. She only got paid like $70,000 to be in this movie, where everybody else is making, a ton more money. But she agreed to be naked, so that helped them. They're like, well, if she's going to be naked, she she can be in the movie. And this really turned her around, because she had got out of that kind of perception of just being in horror movies, because she was in Halloween, The Fog, and then Terror Train, and this other movie called Road Games, which is kind of like a survival horror out in Australia being chased by a truck driver type movie that she was in. And she kind of got pigeonholed into being a horror movie actress. So Halloween, The Fog, Prom Night, and Terror Train all in a row. Then Road Games, Halloween 2. So yeah, she was in a lot of horror movies before they took a chance on her in this movie. And this really kind of put her on the map as a marketable actress. And of course, she was in A Fish Called Wanda, which made it a big hit and showed that she could be a good actress. So she had a lot of good movies, though. She was in My Girl and True Lies, Fish Called Wanda and stuff. So she's made a name for herself. And of course, I always like the fact that she enjoys that Halloween put her on the map, that she's a really, advocate. Whenever they talk to her, she's like, yeah, I love Halloween. It put me on the map. I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for this, and she got producer credit for the last 3 Halloween movies too. So the critical consensus, Rotten Tomatoes gives the film an approval rating of 88% based on 52 reviews with an average of 7.5 out of 10. The site's consensus states, featuring deft interplay between Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, Trading Places is an immensely appealing social satire. Metacritic gave the film 69 out of 100 based on 10 critics, which indicates generally favorable reviews.
Trading Places received generally positive reviews from critics. Reviewers compared it to the socially conscious comedies of the 1930s and 1940s, like My Man Godfrey, Easy Living, Christmas in July, Sullivan's Travels, directed by Peter Sturges, Frank Capra, and Gregory LaCava. Janet Maslin, our favorite, said that the likable film owed a debt to the screwball comedy genre. She continued, Preston Sturges might have made a movie like Trading Places if he had a little less inspiration and a lot more money. Gary Arnold said
the backhanded compliment.
Yeah. Goddamn Janet. All right, here we go. Gary Arnold said the film was too inconsistent to be compared to those older films. Vincent Canby said that the screwball style had been updated for the existential hipness of the 1980s, but the film lacked the same morality tell the genre often espoused that money is not important. Instead, characters do not dismantle or expose the corruption of the financial system. They take revenge on the dukes, obtaining extreme wealth in the process. Even so, he concluded the film was one of the best American comedies released in a long time. Maslin agreed that the film was too enamored with the wealthy institutions it satirized to provide a true criticism of the systems and its failings. She called the American Dream in film form, or she called it the American Dream in film form. Janet,
I hate when people try to review things and compare it to something else and say, well, it's just not as good as those and stuff like that. It was, I think, for a lot of people that have never seen a movie like this when it came out. Like, nobody's going to go watch Sullivan's Travels or My Man Godfrey now. So we go back 40 years and watch this, and it still holds up and it's still funny. Just like, I guess, if you went back from 1984 to the 40s and to watch those old movies, but I still think this still holds resonance, like the difference between the upper class and the lower class, and, the difference between the people who have and people who don't have. So I still think in the lens of now versus then, it still holds up because a lot of the shit is still the same. There's people who are super, super rich, and then there's people who are not rich and they're trying to get rich, and just the system that we have made. The cast were all generally praised. Maslin called it a strange but well-cast film representing multiple Hollywood generations. Ebert said that what could have been stereotypical characters were elevated by the actors and the writing, adding that Murphy and Aykroyd made a perfect team. Canby said that Murphy demonstrated why he was the most successful comedian in the last decade. Several reviewers compared his role to that in 48 Hours. Arnold said that Trading Places was evidence that Murphy's successes were not a fluke and that Murphy demonstrated an exhilarating comic authority. Canby said that Trading Places gave Murphy an opportunity to demonstrate his range of abilities in a lithe, graceful, uproarious performance.
Yep. And although the film's story takes place over several weeks leading up to and after Christmas, Trading Places is regarded as a Christmas film, which reading that is, I guess I just never thought of it as a Christmas film. But in 2008, the Washington Post called it one of the most underrated Christmas films. The Atlantic described it as a less traditional Christmas film, but one whose themes remain relevant, particularly regarding the divide between wealthy and poor. It has appeared on several lists of best Christmas films, including number 5 by Empire, number 12 by Entertainment Weekly, and number 13 by Thrillist. Number 23 by Time Out, number 24 by Rotten Tomatoes, based on overall critical scores there for Rotten Tomatoes, and number 5 by Today, unranked by Country Living, which
Why include it then?
yeah, and the Daily Telegraph. It has been a popular Christmas film on TV in Italy since its television debut in 1986, generally played on Christmas Eve.
That's funny when you look at the trivia about that. In Italy, it gets a huge audience every time they play it on a Christmas Eve in Italy. That it gets like 10 to 12% of every viewer in the nation watches it. It broadcast on TV in Italy on Christmas Eve, which is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah,
I think that's why I included it in this month's list of kind of Christmas movies that aren't really Christmas movies. This one is definitely one of them. And I think, of course, people always like, oh, Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Who gives a shit? And I hate the debate every year. It's like, yeah, it is, but why do we have to debate it every year?
Yeah.
It's one of those
and I still don't,
up.
I'm the one that I don't see Die Hard as a Christmas movie. And so it's, everyone's different, but I just see it as a good action film. And I guess I look at Christmas movies, I think of National Lampoon's Vacation, Christmas Story. I think those
where Christmas is the central theme of the movie.
Yeah.
Not that it just takes place during, around Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody learns a Christmas miracle or anything like that,
Right.
Again, going back to this, we watched this so much. And then once again, I was like 10 and 11, but my parents watch it all the time. We watched it all the time. So they never censored it for us. So we saw all the nudity and all the other kind of stuff. And it was just, that was the thing back in the day. And maybe it was just my family. I don't know if everybody's family can speak the same about it, is that whatever my parents rented or whatever they wanted to watch, they watched, and we just happened to be there to watch it. If we watched it, cool. If we didn't, it was all right. But they didn't censor anything. They never really even when we were, hey, I want to watch HBO. They're like, okay, whatever. The only thing I think my mom would have been upset about is if they caught me watching like Real Sex or something like that. Something that is based. The only reason to exist is to titillate somebody versus a movie that happened to have nudity in it. I think that was the only thing that would be like my parents would probably protest about.
Yeah, same here. Being raised by my father, it was his TV. He watched whatever he wanted, and I'm trying to remember what's the Mel Gibson series. There's like 4 of them. Started in the 80s.
Weapon?
Lethal Weapon, and that was we watched a lot of those style movies, Charles Bronson movies, Die Hard, Death Wish. But I remember Lethal Weapon. I think it's the first one, and I think if I remember correctly, a lady gets thrown from a balcony or the roof.
Yeah. Lethal Weapon 1, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's nudity and stuff. But I remember the first time watching it and the lady gets thrown from the roof, he says, my dad's like, now just remember this is make-believe. And but it's not like in this like soothing, like, hey, just remember this is a story. He's like, make-believe, God damn it, like staring at us. And we're like, yeah. Like,
okay, Dad.
Okay. Yeah. And then same thing, we see a naked woman on the screen and we're like, and he's like, that's make-believe. He's drinking
Real women don't look that way.
Yeah, as he's drinking his beer and we're sitting on and he's sitting in his nice chair that he's always had, and we're sitting on the floor in front of it, and he'd tell us to like we had to sit on the floor to get out of the way because TVs weren't raised off the ground at that
Yeah.
time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you had to sit off to the side so he had a perfect view, and then he would remind you it was make believe. So I just all those fond memories of watching those kind of movies.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody had the big console TV that had like wood around it, and everybody sat down on the floor and watched it. And this may sound cliche, but you were the remote control. Change channel.
Yeah, go back to channel 12. Yep.
So going back to Eddie Murphy, he's still relatively young. He's only 63 years old. And, he was super young when he made this movie. He was still in his early 20s. And it's hard to believe or hard to explain how popular Eddie Murphy was. I mean, and how universally he was in the 80s. And I remember watching like Eddie Murphy Raw, or no, Eddie Murphy Delirious was his stand-up comedy special. And it was nasty as hell. You know what I mean? It was like super, super nasty. But the whole family, my grandma and my aunt and uncle and my mom and dad, we all watched it together and we were all laughing and stuff like that. But I couldn't believe the content of that and just how we all just, your grandparents and stuff are like laughing about it. Oh, he's so funny. And then you watch it today and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we all sat down as a family and watched Eddie Murphy Delirious together.
It would not fly today.
No, I mean, it just some of the topics and, just the things he would talk about. But yeah, it was crazy back then that he was insanely popular. He just had a great run, 48 Hours, Trading Places, Beverly Hills Cop. The Golden Child was kind of a misstep, but it's become a cult classic nowadays. I only remember seeing it maybe once or twice. I don't really remember it. Beverly Hills Cop 2, Eddie Murphy Raw, Coming to America, that was freaking huge. And then he had Harlem Nights and another 48 Hours, Boomerang, Beverly Hills Cop 2. And then even in the 90s, he still had The Nutty Professor. And that was Bowfinger. Then he was in the Shrek movie. So he has consistently had popular movies. But then he had the most insane flop of all time, The Adventures of Pluto Nash.
I've never seen it, but yeah.
In 2002. Yeah, it lost like millions and millions and millions of dollars. It was like one of the biggest flops of all time. Then he did Daddy Daycare. Ugh. Norbit, which is insanely awful.
Yeah.
But I think as far as like...
Didn't he play the doctor to all the animals or something too? Like
Dr. Dolittle, yeah, he did that in 1998. So he kind of switched to like family films in the late 90s, early 2000s.
So can I tell you a funny story about Dr. Dolittle?
Mm-hmm.
So if I remember, it was at the Centennial Twin. And I'm trying to remember 1998 if the Centennial Twin had fully transitioned to, and help me with my memory here, it became like the Dollar Theater. And at one point it was, one of the regular price theaters. Do you remember when it went to the Dollar?
I don't remember exactly when it went to the Dollar, but I remember it returning to a dollar theater.
So at one point, Dr. Dolittle comes there, and we had the big cardboard standee thing, and it had these cardboard animals with these like light sensor things, and if you walked by it, there was a voice recording in the box, and it would say something from the movie, but as the character of the animals. And when it was time to get rid of it, we took those out. And we went into the bathrooms and we poked a hole in the ceiling. We put them up in the ceiling. And so the thing was right there, the sensor. And so if anybody went into the stall, you would hear one of the characters say something. So somebody was, in there taking a shit after eating one of the hot dogs that's been on the rollers for 3 days at the Dollar Theater. You would hear one of the oh my God, it was hilarious. And to watch people walk out of the bathroom so confused.
Going back to Delirious, And mind you, we saw this on HBO or Showtime, one of the pay channels, sitting with my grandma, who was in her late 50s or early 60s at this time, and my aunt and uncle, my mom and dad, my sisters, my cousins. We watched Eddie Murphy Delirious. Came out in October of 1983, so I was still only 10 years old. The word fuck is said 230 times and shit 171 times in 69 minutes. But we're like, oh, it's funny, so great. So yeah, different time back in the 80s when it came to family the family viewing.
Yeah.
So the movie starts out, of course, you're going to it. You see John Landis does a really good job of framing things, of setting up, like, at the beginning, you see the contrast between the poor people standing in line at unemployment or standing outside of those barrels with the fire, and then you see the people inside the Heritage Club, all the snootiness and all the butlers and all the other things that are going on, and the contrast between the rich and the poor, and just basically setting up the whole the characters by showing and not necessarily just telling. It's just by really good staging of everything. So I think he does a good job of that. I always say that things looked bleak in the early 80s, and I think they were. You just see the stuff the way, if you look at early 1980s New York and in Philadelphia, just how things look really bleak. Maybe they still are, I don't know, but back from the movies of the 80s, you sure look like you think you would pull into town and see people standing around a barrel a barrel that's on fire. Something, a fire in a barrel.
Yeah, he definitely brought Philadelphia out on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were saying earlier, I think you felt it. And watching the movie, the one scene at the beginning where he's pretending to be blind and the cops, you'll get to it, but they pick him up. That scene just with the dirty snow on the sidewalk there, and yeah,
I could see. That part was so funny, and I think that's so much of it is Eddie Murphy's personality. He would take something that's maybe not as funny on paper, but he makes it funny. Being a guy who's pretending to be an amputee who lost his legs and making it super funny. And then you see the Dukes, Randolph and Mortimer, and they're talking about heredity versus environment, and you see how snobby Winthrop is. And then he gets chased by the cops, and then he accidentally bumps into Winthrop, which is Dan Aykroyd's character, and he's holding on to his briefcase. So they make it think like he's trying to rob him and take the briefcase away, but he's not. And then, of course, all hijinks ensue. And then that's when Randolph and Mortimer Duke decide, hey, I bet you we could make this person just as wily or as wise in ability to run the company as Winthrop does, but we have to knock Winthrop down. So they make that bet, and that is basically the crux of the movie, that trading places where they knock Winthrop down and bring up Billy Ray. And I think that to me as a kid, that always seemed so fascinating. Like, oh, he gets his house, he gets his, gets all this fancy stuff. And what was kind of funny thinking about it now is that Winthrop's salary was $83,000 a year back in 1983, and I think they did it on the trivia that would equal like $240,000 a year now. So it's a good chunk of money, but I imagine that commodities brokers now probably make a lot more than that.
It doesn't match the lifestyle that they had going in the movie,
exactly, because everything was so much more fancy than somebody earning $223,000, which I think now would be a lot more, it doesn't seem that much compared to 1983, I guess. So
yeah, not for the $35,000 base that he dropped. And
yes. But that also shows that the Dukes owned everything, that Winthrop was staying in their house and he was using their butler and he was making money for himself, but he wasn't independently wealthy, and that could quickly knock him down to their, to being a beggar. I like Clarence Beeks, the shady lackey of the Dukes, and he's played by the guy who's, of course, you remember from Paul Gleason, who was the principal in The Breakfast Club, more famously.
I don't think Paul
I
Gleason
did.
ever played a nice character.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, we should check that out and see if he did.
I'll look.
I always thought that Winthorpe's girlfriend Penelope was cute, and I felt that she actually liked Winthorpe. She bails him. I mean, she loved Winthorpe to a point where she bailed him out of jail, and probably would have believed him unless until Beeks pays Penelope pays Ophelia to kiss him and make him look bad. God, he was in a lot of TV shows and movies. He was on the A-Team, Remington Steele, Cagney and Lacey, Hill Street Blues, The Breakfast Club, also the A-Team again. Give Me a Break.
There's a
21 Jump Street.
Reddit page dedicated to Paul Gleason that says the guy who was the asshole in the 80s. And then another one that says Paul Gleason, the best jerk of the 80s and 90s.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a memorable guy, memorable actor. One of those kind of character actors that you see and you're just like, oh yeah, he's in this movie, you know. Good to that guy. A lot of cameos were in this too, where Bo Diddley was the pawn shop broker. He's like, how much for the gun? The look that he gives him. Frank Oz, who of course is a famous director, but also the voice of Miss Piggy and Grover and Yoda, was also in this. He plays a booking officer in this movie, but he was also a booking officer in or an evidence property person in the Blues Brothers, when he's, giving them all their stuff back, and he's one condom and one, black hat and Ray-Ban shades and all the kind of stuff. The funny thing, I think the people, I was watching this, I saw this thing on YouTube about canceled, how trading places wouldn't play today with the racism and stuff like that. But I think that it belongs in there because it shows the way the Dukes are. The Dukes are racist. They wouldn't have a progressive attitude about Billy Ray at all. They're trying to prove a point with their heredity versus environment, but they're still down in their core, not accepting of that. So I don't know how they would want people to portray that now in a 2024 movie. You still got to show that they're racist. I don't know why they say, oh, it's canceled now or whatever. The only thing I can say is maybe Dan Aykroyd in blackface probably doesn't go over, but even in that case, though, he was still in disguise. He was trying to play a character. I liked Ophelia by Jamie Lee Curtis. She did a really good job as the hooker with a heart of gold who takes pity on Winthorpe and takes him in. And there was a big old to-do about her nude scenes, and they even reference it in Scream, where Randy's like, she didn't show her tits until she became legit. No. But it was the movie. It was very memorable.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound like a perv, but she looked good.
No, I agree. No, I'll be a pervert. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. That was a nice surprise. I didn't know it was going to happen. So, it was a nice surprise.
I kind of like the turn where Billy Ray has money now, so he goes to the bar. He wants to show it off to everybody, and then he brings everybody to a party at his house. Then he's like, "Hey, this is my house. Everybody get the hell out!" And it kind of shows how quickly his attitude would turn. But I think anybody would be that way, where you're like seeing people freeload on your money, and you kind of see him. But he's still nice to Coleman, and he tells him thanks, and he still uses him, so he's still good at heart. But you see him, what money will do to you. One of my favorite parts is when Winthorpe is dressed in the Santa Claus outfit, and he's at the company Christmas party, and he's like putting like meat and stuff in his Santa Claus costume. And the way he's eating, I'm not sure if he's eating salmon or like a piece of meat in the bus, and he's getting it all in his beard and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's got all the drugs, and he puts them in the drawer. And just the way he starts naming them all off, there's Quaaludes, there's cocaine.
PCP.
There's a crack needle in here.
This one has one of those things in a movie that I really love, where your two characters who are starting out opposed of each other they kind of join together for a common cause. I love that kind of stuff in a movie where they take the two people who, that start out one way and turn out another. And I think, as a kid, did not understand anything about what they were doing, about cornering the market on frozen orange juice futures. And I still, to the point, really don't. I had to look it up, that at the end of the movie, and the whole thing is that the Dukes want the crop report early so they can corner the market on the frozen orange juice futures. So they're buying all the contracts to say, hey, the crop is going to be crappy, so frozen orange juice futures are going to be really, really expensive. So they starts out at one place, so they buy and they guarantee, say, hey, we're going to buy all this guaranteed at this level of, what the price goes to. So if you buy it high, you have to pay for it high. So you have to pay for that money and close it, with the money that you have by the end of the trading day. But when the real crop report comes out and they say that it is going to be a normal orange harvest, that the price goes down, and Billy Ray and Lewis are buying the other futures that they'll go low, and they make money that way. So it bankrupts the Dukes and it makes them rich. I think that's the way it works, because the Dukes have to pay the $353 million of all the orange juice futures they bought, would makes them poor, where Billy Ray and Lewis get paid for the money by buying it low, then it goes high. I guess that's the way I think it works.
Yeah,
I may be wrong.
No, I followed the same thing. It was a little confusing, but yeah, I followed it.
Yeah, but up until 5 or 6 years ago, I'm just like, okay, it worked out for them. But I'm like, I really want to know what the hell was going on. Would that really work? I think part of it is too, is that they didn't really have that much money to buy anyway. They only used Ophelia's savings and Coleman's savings. So I'm not really sure how much they could have bought to make themselves ultra wealthy, or maybe it was just seed money to get back to being wealthy. I don't know.
And how they lost 353 was another. There's a little confusion there, for sure. Yeah.
I'm dumb. When I buy my stocks, I just buy them I'll try to find something that has a good dividend. And I'll just go, oh, this one gives you a quarterly dividend, so I'll just buy some of that and then use the dividend to buy more stock. That's the way I do it. Yeah. But I'm not very intelligent when it comes to that kind of stuff.
No, I trust the professionals.
Yes, exactly. So I like the gorilla. It was pretty funny. The fake real gorilla. I think that was a Rick Baker gorilla, because Rick Baker and John Landis go way back. Then they made a movie called Schlock together with a fake gorilla. And then, of course, American Werewolf in London. And poor Clarence Beeks is in the bad gorilla costume to be romantically involved with the other gorilla.
They're in love.
A lot of cameos, though. You see John Belushi's brother is in there. He was the one in the gorilla costume at the beginning. And you see Al Franken. And, just more. The funny thing, and this is just a coincidence, Terror Train is set on New Year's Eve, where there's a big New Year's party going on and with Jamie Lee Curtis and Terror Train, and then there's a New Year's Eve party on a train in this movie.
Yeah. I didn't watch Terror Train.
We should do Terror Train for New Year's, just as a New Year's slasher. No, I think the movie still holds up. It's got a lot of funny scenes, and just the personalities of the star powers of the characters really what makes the movie, because Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy play off each other really well. Jamie Lee Curtis rises above the role that she's given, and you remember her, and everybody's likable. The plot is really funny, and all the improvising that Eddie Murphy does just makes the freaking movie.
Yeah, like you said, it holds up. 40 years later, the comedy still is effective.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've seen it how many times?
God, probably at least 50 times over the years as a kid, through, my teens, through my adulthood, and whenever it comes on. I don't like edited movies. This is one thing about me, that I hate when a movie is on TV and it's edited. I just can't stand it. I just refuse to watch an edited movie on TV. I'll go watch it on, unedited if I have it on DVD or on, or stream it or something like that. I just cannot abide by an edited movie.
Yeah, like Showgirls. You can't catch
Yes,
that
like
one on
Showgirls.
TV.
Yes. What's the point of Showgirls being edited? It's like, it just makes no sense. Who wants to see edited?
Yeah, you have no idea what's going on.
One of my biggest complaints now is that AMC still shows the edited for TV versions of Friday the 13th. Because AMC shows The Walking Dead, and they have their own TV shows that are like super grisly and gross, and and it's why don't you just show the regular movie? Just show the regular movie, or
did
re-edit
AMC
it
show
to have
Breaking Bad?
Yeah, Breaking Bad, and what's the other? They have something with witches, with Alexander Daddario, and it's got The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is extremely graphic. And that was, was on AMC for, still on AMC. Yeah, that's one thing that I will not watch an edited movie. You want to watch this on TV? What channel is it on? Oh, it's on TBS. No. I'll watch maybe a superhero movie on TNT or TBS or FX, because that basically they're showing everything. But if it's an R-rated movie on TV and it's edited, no way. That's the line in the sand that I'm drawing
God damn it.
in this episode. God damn it.
Earlier today, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said he hadn't listened to. I just think about Showgirls. He said he hadn't listened to Showgirls yet, and he was going to listen to it probably tomorrow morning. And he said, "Well, should I watch the movie?" And I said, "No." It's very rare.
Please don't watch it.
Yeah, I would say, Mike, don't waste your time. Just listen to the show. It's a good show. It tells you everything you need to know. But I told him the facts of Showgirls. But it's interesting how you think about these big box office movies and how some of them don't hold up 40 years later. And yet 15 million was a lot of money in 1983 to make a movie on.
Yeah,
but
totally.
it made 150 million in the box office in 1983. So a lot of people watched Trading Places. And I told him, somehow Showgirls is still number 25 all time for MGM. But I guarantee you, look at some of these other big blockbusters that came out. I'd be curious to see what blockbusters came out around 82 to 84 that had a bigger budget than Trading Places that we're not remembering 40 years later.
Yeah. A lot of the movies that are classics now, and we've talked about it over and over in our episodes, weren't big hits. Like Blade Runner is a bona fide classic, but it was considered a flop. The Thing was considered a flop, and a lot of these movies that were just considered just box office disappointments now back then, but through repeated showings on cable, on HBO, at the video store, they became classics. And people still, remember them fondly, but some of those movies that were big movies in the 80s, people don't remember them. Like Out of Africa. When's the last time you watched Out of Africa?
Actually, a couple months ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
The Robert Redford movie Out of Africa you watched.
Yeah.
Why?
It's a long story, but yeah.
Jesus. All right, you proved me wrong then.
That's so funny. I literally watched it. Yeah.
Why? Out of all the movies you can watch, let's watch Out of Africa.
I was told it was good. And it wasn't horrible.
I'm sure it's not, but it's just not the first movie I'm going to go pick out when it comes to movies from the 80s.
No, it's typically not one I would watch, but I will say it wasn't bad.
But even like Terms of Endearment, which was an Oscar-winning movie and like the second most popular movie of 1983, you don't hear a lot of people talking about Terms of Endearment. It was a big movie, but it's not one of those things you're like, oh, remember Terms of Endearment? Well, let's watch that. Who wants to watch a tear-jerking cancer movie from the 80s, from the 80s?
Yeah,
let's watch Mac and Me instead. Wow.
Yeah,
Out of Africa.
So you might know this, and I don't know you're the brain here in this operation. But I just looked up, hey, what are some box office disappointments from 1982 to 1984? And just the AI overview pops up and gives me something really quick. Obviously, Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
But the other one, it says Inchen. Have you heard of Inchen? The 1982 film Inchen was a box office flop, losing $41 million. New York Times called it the most expensive B movie ever.
I think that was a Paul Schrader. Is it Inchon?
Yeah.
1981 film. The Battle of Incheon was an amphibious invasion that the Battle of Korean War. That's interesting. Director Terrence Young. I never even heard of it. That's interesting.
Yeah, but
At least September 17th of 82.
Yeah, and it lost more money than this movie cost to make. Like,
wow,
3 times.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've not seen that one. Yeah, I just remember a lot of highfalutin movies back in the day that were, Oscar winners and, really important films that I don't think anybody talks about anymore, where like these classic, like comedy movies still live on, like Vacation and this, and then, of course, Bachelor Party and things like that, or even movies like The Three Amigos are still considered classics back in the day, or even now that people see them and look on them fondly. So not 100% sure what we're going to do next week. It depends if Neil is back or not. It could be The Shining, or it could be another movie that just happens to be set around Christmas that doesn't really have to do with Christmas. We'll figure that out. But thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. If you want to look us up, we're rvspodcast222@gmail.com. We are on Threads, which I think is dying out because Blue Sky is taking over the Twitter wannabe. So I think we are on Blue Sky. We just started. So look for that. And we are on Instagram and we are on Facebook for our socials. If you want to contribute to the cause, go to buymeacoffee.com and look up the Retro Video Store. Helps keep the metaphorical lights on this losing proposition that we're in. Profit loss. But we really appreciate it. We're compiling our 2025 movie list. So if you can think of any movies you'd like us to go over, send it to us, rvspodcast222@gmail.com. And we'll give you a shout out if you suggest anything. And hopefully Neil's back next week. And thank you, David, for holding it down.
Yeah, I hope Neil comes back so I can just fade back into the distance and be the third wheel and not have to carry so much pressure and responsibility. Neil's got big shoes to fill. You're welcome.
Oh, you said you're welcome in honor of Neil. So yeah.
In honor of Neil, I said you're welcome.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Retro Video Store Podcast.